All right, welcome to another episode of the Sonic Visions podcast. After a long hiatus, we are back with episode 17, joined by Lana, Evie Shrug, Zach, and Nick. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good mate. Thanks for having
Doing
us.
Good to
good.
see you. How you doing, SM Odd?
Yeah, good, good. So let's not waste any time. We got a lot of topics to cover. Let's get right into it. The first topic is regarding noise cancellation, active noise cancellation, which is a technology that's commonly used and becoming more and more popular. As audiophiles, it's something that we tend to, I guess, shy away from often. Do we feel that it negatively impacts sound quality?
Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of times when we see a headphone with noise canceling, it's very squarely aimed at like mainstream and very particular sound signatures. What do you guys think? Have you ever experienced noise canceling headphones that also sounded really good?
I think, as you say, they're sort of aimed at the consumer market, so they're not exactly sort of tuned to the hi-fi market. Then, in the very nature of them, they have to be closed cans as well, and that again is,
Yes.
a lot of guys will say that you cannot have high fidelity closed cans because you've got too many reflections. Like, yeah, you can get some pretty good ones, but then as soon as you add in the stuff that has to operate to be active noise cancelling, it's another compromise. So I don't know. I feel like it's one of those areas where audiophiles are always going to see it as too much of a compromise, and the technology needs to be a lot more advanced to make it, you know, super resolving or sound really linear. But the ones I've heard have sort of sounded like Bose sort of headphones, like overly bassy, mid super rolled, like treble super rolled, and like they
A
sound
little bit
okay and they're good.
soft.
That are yeah, a bit soft. You can sit on a plane and listen to them and listen to a movie, but it sort of sounds like you're listening to it through like 10 plies of tissue paper. It's
Yeah,
just
Hmm.
yeah, I have a Bose Quiet Comfort. It has noise canceling. I mean, really, it sounds like any other consumer headphone out there. I think that the active noise canceling is a very sort of circumstantial feature. Like maybe someone on a bus, someone on an airplane, someone that lives right next to a construction site might want to completely cancel out noise.
Airplanes.
Yeah. However, like I think most of us don't need them. And
mm,
not only that, but a lot of people I see complain that they actually get headaches from the noise canceling itself.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, and that's something I've experienced. So definitely I think there's room for improvement with noise canceling. I don't
mm.
think it's perfect.
It's used quite often in recording as well, isn't it? Like if you're in a booth, they'll give them active noise cancelling headphones, so that way, like what's coming out of the headphone that they're hearing as playback is not going to mess with the recording. So they'll have the track played back to them. They'll be singing along to it, but they'll be wearing active noise cancelling. So for stuff like that, it
Hmm.
can be really useful to artists to like keep up with things because I mean even CIMs can get a little bit of leak with them, like when
Yeah.
they're singing that close with microphones that sensitive. So I guess it makes sense
Right.
for that.
It's very
Well,
interesting because I am a singer, and when I have worn headphones while attempting to record, I'm not a professional. I just have a microphone and headphones at home. But when I would wear headphones that would really cancel out a lot of the background sound, I would often just find myself screaming into the microphone
right,
because
because you can't hear yourself and you're just going loud.
exactly. So for that reason, like I just have the background track playing like at a low volume, wearing some closed back or even open backs. Like you can act like your mic, unless it's super sensitive and picky, won't always pick up sound. So I will just have the background track playing at about
Yeah.
20% volume.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if I isolate my headphones too much while attempting to record, I just find myself like yelling, and people
Right.
will walk in, they'll be like, "Why are you yell singing?" I'd be like, "I
Well,
didn't
because
realize."
you get all that bone conduction. Your your own voice is being picked up by your jaw and being sent back to your eardrums, and everything else is canceled, and your ears are occluded, so everything seems much louder. Yeah, totally. I originally brought this up because I had kind of always believed that that it was bad, if you know what I mean. That it was like, it's canceling out the outside sound, so maybe it's canceling the audio of that you're trying to play back in the music, and you're losing part of the signal, and there's holes in it. And I suppose it's not necessarily perfect. However, I was telling this to Axel Grell, and I was like, hey, you know, I didn't really think, why did they put active noise canceling in the AirPods Pro? Like, why would you, if you have in-ear headphones, why would you even want ANC? Because they're already like earplugs, and they're doing a nice job of passively isolating you from sound. And he says, oh, well, actually, if you use noise canceling, you can improve the sound compared to regular earbuds. I was like, what? And he had to go. He had to leave, so he didn't have time to explain how it would actually be better. So I was left to guess. I mean, I believe him because, you know, he makes some. He's got like 25 years of engineering history. But I was like, okay, well, is it like, all right, well, maybe if you're doing noise canceling, it's only going to cancel as much as much volume as it hears, and you can have the waveforms not interact. Maybe noise canceling is better because you don't have competition from external sound as much. Like everything, it's almost like you're in an anechoic chamber, so you're not having the sound influenced by the environmental sound. Like the rumble of a bus makes your bass seem weaker because it's intruding on the sound, and you just don't hear the bass as much. So you have to, let's say you're using open headphones, you'd have to boost the bass. But those were just theories. And he was like, oh, no. When he finally came back like a week later and I got to talk to him some more, he's like, no, actually, when you have noise canceling, by its design, you have to have a microphone or two on the outside, and you have to have a microphone on the inside. Inside the acoustic back cavity, basically behind the driver and in front of the back ear cup. And so what the microphone can do is actually pick up on the back waves coming off of the driver, and also the resonances and flaws caused by the closed enclosure of the earbud or the closed headphone, and actually cancel those flaws out. So in a way, it approaches closer to an open-backed headphone because you're not having the interference and resonance and reflections from the ear cups, because it's able to cancel those too. And I never thought of it that way. I was like, wow, that's ingenious that you could not only cancel out the outside sounds, but you're also canceling the flaws of the inside of the ear cup as separate from the signal. I don't know. So I thought that was fascinating. I just wanted to share that. What do you guys think of that? Do you think that's real?
I'm skeptical.
You're skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a clever use of the technology. I I obviously it's a little bit hard to compare, but if you get a chance, if you have like a headphone that does have noise canceling, and you can turn it off and on, especially Bluetooth, because Bluetooth headphones always have an EQ anyway. It's kind of built into the Qualcomm Bluetooth chipset and everything. Try turning it off and on, and yeah, you may get a DSP, but if you're using Bluetooth, it's probably applying DSP anyway. With the noise canceling, it might actually be clearing up some of the mud and some of the closed back honkiness, depending on what model you do. But I think that's a really clever idea, and it gave me actual respect for ANC that I didn't have before. I don't know, it's an interesting thought.
All right. Well, fair enough. Next topic is something that is related to a phrase that I think Zach coined, which is fashion-fi. But do you
Oh yeah.
care? Do you care about the aesthetics of the gear that you have, whether it's electronics, whether they're actual headphones, speakers, whatever it is? Do you actually? How much do the looks of the product matter to you when you're making a purchase decision?
I think I'll start since I
I
coined
hear
the
you now.
term. Sorry, yeah, I had to pop out for 2 minutes. My partner came home, and it's rude not to say hello.
It's good
uh,
though.
Fashion fire for me is like where, I think the gear is oriented towards like a particular purchaser, basically like higher end consumer products, which is they're like pretty to look at. They function quite well. They definitely sound better than, your entry level sort of KEF speakers and that sort of stuff. But at the same time, they're designed to just look nice in someone's living room. And I don't think
Mhm.
that exists much in the headphone world, except for maybe the Mezzi stuff, which I'll probably cop some flack from some lovers of the Mezzi stuff. I think it's very pretty and well built, but I think it's underperforming. But so to me, the Mezzi's a bit of a fashion-fi sort of headphone. But
What, were
like
you
when I
here yesterday?
is it there yesterday? No, I wasn't here yesterday. I was a bit busy.
There was someone who
What?
really wanted Mezes because they look good, but I don't know. I don't want to bash their thing, but I don't think they're the only headphone that specifically tries to look good. I mean, I'm not gonna bash the sound quality at all, but you specifically have the limited edition wood ZMF headphones.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of people think that the original, or maybe not the original one because it was a little bit big, but the newer Sony MDR Z1R closeback headphone. I've
Oh
had
yeah.
people describe that as a work of art. Um, People have said the HD 800 is super ugly, but it kind of grew on them. I don't think that was designed to be fashionable. It was totally
Headphones like the Abyss as well, where they're like so ugly when you're
oh
wearing them, and then
functional over
yeah, and the
form.
ergonomics is so bad. But I guess like for me, it's like it's a personal thing for everybody, right? Like if
Beats.
if yeah, my house is super modern looking in places and like really maximalistic, I guess, but in like a really modern way with a lot of like sharp lines and bright colors and stuff. Like I couldn't put like a vintage looking JBL or Klipsch speaker in my living room. It would stand
Uh,
out like what is this? It would stand out atrociously. But at the same time, I don't listen to speakers in my living room. I have like a dedicated space for it. So I could run whatever speakers I want there. But yeah, for some people they wouldn't buy them just based on the aesthetic, I guess, because it wouldn't match the rest of their, the aesthetics of their home.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, yay for choices. But I don't know. It's funny. Like, I guess speakers are like all for you. Like, you're just gonna buy something that looks good because it makes you feel good and it's you know feels high end and seems to add luxury to your home. But it's kind of just a you thing. With headphones, I could see it actually being kind of justified because a lot of times people want a headphone to wear while they're going out in public and they're going to be hearing, but they're also going to be seen. Um, I don't know. I have no problem wearing like purple headphones. One of my first ones was the purple AD 700. I like a unique, wild look. Um, but yeah, some people just feel uncomfortable or awkward if they have something big and too utilitarian on. I think it may not be the first concern, but I don't know. Fashion-fi, I think there's a place for it.
Yeah.
But so would you say, Ev, that like of like a value of 1 to 10, if the headphone sounds amazing, but would you buy it because of an aesthetic? Would you not buy it because it's too ugly? Like where do you draw the line, I guess?
Yeah, and that's really tricky. Go ahead, Nick.
I think it was Lana that was popping
Uh,
in.
I was trying
Nick's
to text you in
gone.
the chat behind it. Go ahead.
No, let Nick talk. I'll talk
Yeah, let
after.
Nick talk.
Is Nick there? I didn't hear him.
Yes, because yeah, I hear him.
Oh.
His mic's cut. You can't hear him.
Yeah, Zach and I don't know if they can hear it on the stream, but me and Lana both hear Nick, and he
Yeah.
starts talking, and then you.
Okay,
Yeah,
Nick, try now.
we've been talking over him for a while, and
Oh
I
shoot!
Okay, I've raised
There.
my foot. Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Sorry about that.
Sounds just as good to me.
Okay, thank you. As I even had some comments
Technology.
earlier about the noise canceling, but we'll go on. I think the sound quality is number one when it comes to where am I going to spend my dollar, as far what it looks like, aesthetics. Is it ugly as a turd? I don't really care if it's giving me the best sound that is possible from a piece of electronics or speaker. Even if I'm going out in public, I don't wear headphones out, so it doesn't matter. But even for a space in the house, uh, if you're buying the speakers because they look pretty and not because of their sound, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the point. Now, do you want them to look good and sound great? That's a compromise. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
face it, audio is a compromise. Do you want the best sound, or do you want the best pretty, or do you want the mixture of the two? And
Yeah.
and which way are you going to lead farther to? So if I'm going to spend the same number of dollars, do I want to compromise, or do I want the best that those dollars can bring me as far as sound quality? I think it's the sound quality that's going to get me every time. Even though I'm looking at a beautiful rosewood speakers right now, and I love their looks, but if they didn't sound as good as they did, I wouldn't purchase them. I had the option on these. I could have got just plain old black, whatever, but I spent the extra dollars and got rosewood because the next step up for quality and sound would have been a whole lot more than just the step up for the looking good part. So I really think that if you're into sound, that like we all are, we're going to spend the extra dollar on the sound versus the looks. Now, if you're going to have a room where you entertain, well, that room is compromised to start with because it's not just your listening room, uh, and you're going to make it so other people can be there. So they have to look good, because why would you invite people in to look at a third?
Right.
Even if it
Even if your
does,
family's going to accept it into their home, and
right? And not everybody's going to understand, and especially in a when you're in a with a group of people, unless they've come to just listen to the speakers. But when you're having people over and you're having a get together and this and that,
it's
they
just sitting there.
right, or even if they're playing some music really quiet, they need to look good, and the sound
Right.
quality is not as important.
Architectural,
Right.
sculptural.
So I think that the premium dollar is going to go towards the best sound you can get, and then pretty, if it's reasonably priced and not the next step up in speaker, you throw in some pretty if it's available. A lot of subwoofers don't offer pretty, but they're just big black boxes and they do their job really well. And the ones that have the option of pretty and sound well, we're talking,
Mega money, hey. You
yeah,
look
we're
at
talking
those anniversary rails
cool
come to
money.
mind.
right.
Oof.
So I think we're going to go with the quality of the sound, and that's my opinion on that. As far as voice canceling goes, let me take one step back real quick.
I'm actually really curious. Yeah, what do you think?
I do have. Well, I like the theory, and I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, engineering and what they're able to do is just incredible. I mean, you can swallow a pill and they can track your whole digestive system and all that stuff. And so the micro part of it's feasible. I purchased a set of noise canceling, the Sony WF-1000X M3s, and I really like them. I mean, I wouldn't listen to them versus my ZMF headphones,
Yeah,
but
sure.
they serve their purpose for what I bought them for, out in the
Fill a
yard,
need.
doing this and that, and different functions, but where I could turn off the rest of the world, but I could still hear it. If I have the option of doing that. And the noise canceling, I think, does damage the quality of the sound some. I don't think it you can have the both worlds. And I've listened to a when I was shopping for these, I listened to a lot of different sets that were any IEMs, and I think all of them had their setbacks. But if you require, being able to turn them on and off as far as noise canceling, you're going to give up the quality. That as far as how much you're giving up, I don't think these give up a huge amount, but it's not going to be the quality of dedicated headphones that you would listen to, in your comfy chair. So
I don't know. We'll have to see. I think that like in general, active noise canceling was not good. Just like Bluetooth was not good, and wireless in general was not good.
mhm.
And I think there's been a lot of advancements with more accurate analog to digital and digital to analog conversion, and of course the Bluetooth codecs and things. There's definitely, like Lana said, she's before we started the show, she's like, I like uh, new features and some kind of interesting innovations. And yeah, I think that's one area that, like, with digital signal processing, whether it be noise canceling, equalization, um, virtual surround, other tricks, I think that's going to be a very interesting place where there's a lot of room to grow. We'll have to see, though. I mean, like, I don't want to like promote too much. Obviously, I should say I do have connections with Axel Grell, working for Grell Audio. I'm not telling everyone to go buy one. I'm just saying, if you have a noise canceling headphone, try it in Bluetooth, turning off and on the ANC, and just see how does it affect like the bloom, and the honkiness, the closed back feeling of it. And it
Mhm.
may not be in every manufacturer, but I'm curious to hear if that is an improvement on other brands, because I kind of only have two active noise canceling headphones, and you can't turn off the noise canceling on the other ones.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's getting back to Lana saying, features, and because I don't know how much more real we're going to really be able to make real sound like real. So yes, the the great beyond is all the stuff we can add on to and change. And
hmm
let's face it, everyone listens to the same exact track, and they make 64 flavors and adding daily, and
right.
everybody likes a different flavor. Who likes a little more bass? Who likes a little more mid range?
Yeah.
Likes the
Tell me
tweeter.
sweet little lies.
Exactly, exactly.
Cool. And as far as fashion goes, it's the same kind of thing. To bring it in full circle, like obviously, your different taste in audio, your different taste in look aesthetics, you have to be happy with it. Some people are just not going to be able to accept a certain thing,
Yeah.
but we have options.
Yeah, like, for example, higher end Tectons. Okay,
The
I don't
speakers,
yeah,
yeah.
the speakers, I don't know why, but the ones that look like they have 15 eyes on them? Every time I see a photo of those
It's like a
large
Ghibli
Tectons,
monster.
yeah, with like 15, it looks like they have like 15 eyes, I would honestly be like, I feel like I would be like, I feel like my speakers are watching me if I had those Tectons.
You can't see my face right now, but I'm spreading my eyelids open really wide.
Yeah, I feel those are more of an acquired taste. I personally don't think clip shiz. I think they often get like I have clip shiz. I often feel people talk about how vintage and non-contemporary they look. To me, they're just another cabinet, and I feel like you can make those definitely work in certain rooms even more modern. I feel they're
Sure.
definitely more avant-garde speaker designs. I think Wilson's are kind of avant-garde,
Yeah.
they have a
Modern
very
sculptural.
yeah, modern sculptural like that. I don't know how that would jive with my room aesthetic.
Fair. Ko does it
Klipsch's,
well. He does it like an interior designer. His
yeah,
pictures are always stunning. But then
yeah,
again, he's got good taste.
yeah, Ko does. But yeah, Klipsch's, I mean, they're just a cabinet, and I feel I can work around a cabinet. So I think
Hmm.
when I was auditioning speakers, I'm very picky. So when I was auditioning speakers, I fell in love with the Klipsch Fortes, and I swear if they were hideous, I would somehow make it work. I
Time to
would,
get out the spray paint.
yeah, I would somehow make it work. I don't think they are hideous, luckily. As far as headphones go, okay, I have to say I hear so much talk of Meze Empyreans being fashion-fi, but let me tell you, they look gorgeous on a shelf, but as soon as you put
Yeah.
them on, you look like Princess Leia
With the ear buns.
with the
They're
mega
pretty nice
sideburns.
pads. They're pretty big ear cups.
Yeah, like, let me tell you, I looked ridiculous with those on. I would not wanna
You?
be Yeah, no, I would not
With
wanna
any headphones?
Yeah, no, yeah, Meze well, my head is a bit narrower, so they just, like, ate up the side of my face.
Oh. Well,
And
that was an attempt at a subtle compliment.
yeah, I looked like, just Princess Leia aesthetic with the massive side buns going on, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror wearing them, and I remember saying, "Gosh, you guys look much prettier sitting on a shelf than on my head."
Well, it happens. Just, what's
The question I have, Lana, is: are avant-garde speakers avant-garde in their design? I was just joking.
Hmm.
Okay, that was a joke fail. Anyways, so I just want to say one thing about the whole fashion-fi thing and the aesthetics.
Yeah, please.
For me, I think that for me aesthetics definitely matter. They're definitely a factor. For me, it's not a question about sound quality versus aesthetics, which some people sometimes discuss. Anytime you bring up this topic, people will inevitably say, oh well, do you want it to look good or sound good? Like this is the kind of common meme whenever this topic's brought up. But for me, it's obviously sonics are first for me, but if something looks good as well while it sonically performs well, then I am willing to potentially pay more for that, because to me there's this whole notion of the device as a point of pride, an art piece, something you look at and it gives you kind of positive.
Inspiration.
Yeah, it gives you positive emotions. Like if I look, when I wake up, I look at like my gear and I like the way it looks and it makes me feel good, and that's to me part of the value of ownership of a device. Now, of course, you can turn that to 11 and look at things like WADAX, Atlantic Reference, and like it's so elaborate and has all these curves and it just looks so crazy, and you're paying a fortune for those. And how good are they compared to MSB? How good are they compared to Rockna? That's much more affordable, which maybe it's not as elaborate looking, but so you have to be a bit careful, of course, with the whole aesthetic thing. But
Don't
to
get carried
me,
away. Yeah.
if you get like a nice piano black finish on a cabinet, or like just nice metal chassis design on electronics, I really enjoy that. The classic is the gold knob. Cole's not here, but
Yeah.
Cole's
Gold is best.
Cole's DMP Z1 with that balling potentiometer and the gold knob like
And the
that.
M30.
Yeah, that stuff. I'm a kind of a sucker for that kind of stuff.
But see,
Have you guys seen the Terminator DAC amps?
no, hadn't seen them.
Oh, I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, basically, they look like they would sound like they would be looking.
Which
they have
company? Which company is it?
And I have to look it up, but I think
Denafrips?
I saw them when I was in Munich, but they have DAC amp. But basically, to describe them for you and all the viewers and everything, they might be not Denafrips, because the actual enclosure is shaped like a human skull without a jaw.
Oh,
and then
Oh.
there's
right, yeah.
two
Okay.
red LEDs where the eyes are, and then there's
Yeah, I saw them.
little round glasses in front, and then
I
you
know
like plug it in to like the face of it,
I know
the mouth.
exactly what you're talking about. When you said Terminator, I thought you meant Denna Fripp's Terminator for a moment.
Yeah, that's a little bit less exciting and unusual looking. But no, I wish I could tell you. I may actually have the name wrong, but it looks like that. Um, yeah, I don't see a picture.
Macintosh is another one that comes to mind when I think about Fashionify. Not because I'm saying Macintosh is bad, but just because they seem to put a huge amount of work into the chassis and getting that classic mirrored and black and green LEDs on tubes, and like
Oh,
they have a,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
And the
Uh,
Yeah.
gothic font, like the
yeah.
green glowy tubes and the gothic font, it just screams, "This is for the audiophile that used to shop at old school Hot Topic in the early 2000s."
Uh, yeah.
All
Hey,
right.
Lana. Earlier, Lana, you were talking about the Fortes,
Yeah,
and you were stating that even if they were ugly, and you would still consider getting them. Isn't that the turd I was describing?
absolutely.
I mean, I mean, the at some point you got to give up caring what it looks like if the sound is just heaven to your ears.
Right.
Absolutely,
You
yeah.
But-
can polish that turd.
and one more thing about the headphones you were saying, where you thought you looked like Princess Leia.
Yeah.
You, you know, a lot of 16-year-old little boys a long time ago really had a thing for her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Carrie Fisher was gorgeous, and I definitely would. I'm kind of sad that I didn't do a Princess Leia cosplay now when I had the Imperials.
that would have
Opportunity.
been awesome to see a picture of that. Sweet.
Um,
That's all good.
I think Tyler, with the ZMFs, he also made a Princess Leia comment about his closed back verities. I'm pretty sure I remember him making that comment that they also give the side bun appearance.
Yeah.
All right. Fair
Oh,
enough.
I just
So
found the picture, but go ahead. Yeah, next thing.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, we can send it to us, and I can put it in the description for people who are watching this. So the next topic is regarding upgrading, and the reason I kind of chose this is because I saw a DMS video, and I've linked the video. I'll try to put the link in the description of the stream video. But yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
I think basically the TLDR kind of summary of DMS's position is that the problem with upgrading is that no matter how much money you spend, no matter how much you upgrade, eventually what happens is you get kind of used to the sound of your system, and when you get used to it, then your mind kind of wanders about, well, how can I push this further, or how can I change the sound, or what piece of gear can I buy that will make things sound different. So that's what he said is kind of a problem with this whole kind of upgrading merry-go-round that a lot of audiophiles go through. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Is that something that you guys face yourselves? How do you deal with that, etc.?
Well, all right. Um, in my opinion, the way to get off the upgrade merry-go-round is to side grade instead. For example, you get tired of your system, it sounds the same if you don't have tubes in there, buy some tubes. Now you have solid state and tubes, whether it's for speakers or headphones. And when you are in the mood for something different, you can choose, do I want to use my solid state setup? Do I want to use my tube setup? And there you go. That's basically flavor without needing to completely overhaul the whole thing, from the ground up. Um, Obviously, like if you feel that there are better components out there, then that's where I got hung up on upgrading. I had a shit Bifrost 2. I heard a Bracasti, big mistake. Ended up getting the Bracasti. I really can't imagine wanting to upgrade from it, so I think that really good components are timeless, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that once you get a really good component, you're not gonna sit there thinking, because since I got my Bracasti, I haven't even thought about, oh, what other DACs are out there? I really want to know. I really don't want to know because I honestly could care less. Um, so I think that if you have the itch, then likely you have not like reached your goal for a certain component. Because once you do, you really, really like get off the upgrade-itis merry-go-round. You take a back seat. I'm not saying I'll never get back on it because I know one day I'll probably want to upgrade something. However, I find it easier to take it component by component. Um, for example, I was strictly a solid state type of person, and I kept getting different solid state amps, for example. And I had all these headphones, and I kept asking myself, well, why am I just not that satisfied? And then I added tubes in there, and then I would be able to switch from tubes to solid state, and I would tell myself this is what I needed. I didn't need to upgrade everything, I just needed an addition. And then when I would want tubes, I would use tubes. When I would want solid state, I would use solid state. And that I think that's a good way to approach things. I think people need to just stop looking and hyper focusing too much on the price tag or getting something better, because sometimes you think that you want better and you might spend a lot of money thinking that you're going to spend more money, you're going to get the better experience, but in reality what you're actually craving is just something different. So,
Mm-hmm.
my advice for a lot of people is, instead of chasing the next best thing, the next most
An entire
expensive
new
thing,
setup.
instead of chasing an entire new setup, maybe just get an addition that is so entirely different, like a polar opposite from what you already have, and that's an addition that you can afford. And
Like a
that
nice
way,
complimentary.
yeah, a nice complement to what you already have. And that way, because if you built a system that you already love, then sometimes you might just want to break from it. But I guarantee you that if you were to take a break from it, you would eventually also miss the system you built, because you built it to your taste, to your liking. If on some days it just starts sounding redundant and you feel like you are, you know, just bored with it, then, put on some tubes or something, and that'll give a complete 180, a different flavor to it. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's been my approach.
Yeah, I would add to that that in order to go that route, which everybody here knows that I have uh, a multi switch for changing two different sets of speakers, tubes, or solid state amps, and three different processors. And of course, throw in the turntable, CDs, and Rune. And if you get bored with that, I you're impossible. I just can't see getting bored with being able to switch, like Lana was saying, from tubes to solid states, uh, mismatch, match, uh, try something with something else, change the DSP. So many different things you can do that uh, by the time you get back around to listening to your bass system, it's like rediscovering it for the first time again. You're like,
Absolutely.
You've
yeah,
been recalibrated.
right, yeah. And it's like a reset. Like if you really want to shock your system, just do YouTube for a week, or
Yeah.
you will be so happy and thrilled in rediscovering real music.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, Ed, like my thought is very similar to that. If you don't mind me jumping in?
Go right ahead.
Cool. And I completely agree with that. And I also believe that essentially we like the sensation of progression. We like feeling like we leveled up, we've gotten to a new grade, we've upgraded. So that's definitely a human nature kind of thing. And it's in some ways very wonderful to pursue excellence and improvement. Um, but one of the things that has been best for me, and maybe this seems maybe too obvious, but when I do that, the biggest help for me has been streaming audio. I used to be Mr. I'll buy a CD, I'll buy an album a couple times a year, and I'll listen to the same stuff, the old things and the newest one a bunch of times. But yeah, I will sometimes get kind of stuck trying to review a headphone or something, or just really understand it, and I'm spending so much time repeating like the first 30 seconds of this one track that I know has this particular quality that I'm listening for, and I get really sucked into that. And sometimes I need to step back and be like, okay, some DJ somewhere or some computer algorithm on a streaming service, just give me something completely new that I've never heard, and step back from super analyzing. And when I sit back and I just, discover something new through a new song or a new track, a lot of times I find that joy again. And then I have a lot less of like trying to chase a fresh experience, because I've got a new experience with new music. That may, for other people who are used to finding new music all the time, I suppose that could possibly get old too. But so far it's been like my secret is, I have a bunch of, if I was not getting product samples, I pretty much have stayed with a one model of headphone for like 3 years, 5 years. HD 800's been like 7 years now. I with a new DSP feature or a new little add-on, that's definitely good. I like the idea of tube rolling. I got a tube amp specifically for that. But at the end of the day, like sometimes a new artist album release is enough to just do it for me. And yeah, that's another tip that I would give, is just listen to something completely new, maybe even a different genre than you ever listened to, or ask someone who's really into a genre, hey, you love drum and bass. I hate drum and bass. What is good about drum and bass? Show me a good track in drum and bass. Wow, this is great. And then that, sometimes that kind of a new experience also does it for me. Oh,
Yep.
and I made everyone mute. Sorry.
No, 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 no. These are all great points, and I'm just trying to think of what I would add to it. I think that I agree with everything you guys said. I think, yeah, rotation of sound is something that keeps things fresh. I know a lot of people have kind of different chains or different kind of gears they switch between, and they it's not that they are kind of evaluating which one they would choose, but it's more that they keep both. And let's say one chain or one set of electronics is kind of warmer, or even a headphone is warmer and more engaging with a certain type of genre of music, and then another chain is better for classical, and so on and so forth. So I think that having different kind of systems for different kinds of types of sounds that you like, or whether it's you switch out one component or one headphone or one speaker or whatever it is. Speaker obviously would be harder, but I think that's a great way of kind of dealing with this kind of upgrade treadmill. And I agree with what Lana said too about how sometimes when you are upgrading, it's very legitimate, and it's the point where you haven't found that one piece of gear that would impress you so much that you just lose interest in upgrading, like she did with Brocasti. So I think that's I think balancing, the key is balancing that sentiment with the sentiment of, well, I maybe if I just rotate stuff around, I can enjoy my system to the point where I don't go bankrupt, and I don't pull a J where I'm getting like
Yeah.
new $250,000 speakers every 6 months, that kind of thing.
Smod, did adding tubes to your system help you with the upgrade bug that you had a while back?
Oh yeah, Lana, were totally right on the money, and everybody else, Nick and Zach and you guys talking about tubes really, really helped me. That was a big evolution for me in my journey, I think. So having my and what's funny is I talk about that store, American Sound of Canada, or Angie, and Angie and a guy that used to work there, who's my buddy Nate. He actually works at Acora now, the Granite speaker company in Canada. Both of them kept kind of yelling at me about tube preamps. Like they said that they actually believe that was the most important component of the whole chain. And they said their famous phrase is "go broke on your tube preamp." And so now I realize that, because I compare my solid state preamp that I have here to my tube preamp, and the difference is incredible. And then what's interesting is that even, and that's for speakers, but even for headphones, this concept of a tube preamp into a Class A solid state, it creates this incredible blend of like the tube benefits, where you get that holographic layering and big sound stage and more of a liquid kind of realistic tone. But then you get that slamming incredible bass from the solid state, and the combination is just incredible. And so much so, and this kind of goes into our next topic. It's a kind of nice segue about speaker amps for headphones. So what I found is that I to answer your question, Lana, it did satisfy my bug, but it kind of created a new bug, which was trying to push
new rabbit hole.
Yeah. Like right now, I feel very satisfied with my speaker chain. I have no interest in upgrading. But now, I want to kind of push my headphone chain up. So that's why I got this Elekit amp, which a lot of people on Sonic Visions have. But as good as it is, it's a step above my solid state head amp. But it cannot compare to the chain, the tube pre into my Class A solid state. And I've tried so many different combinations, but that combination is so unbelievable, even with HD650, HD800. And what's funny is that a lot of people don't understand this concept, even audiophile store owners, that the fact that you can run high sensitivity dynamic headphones off of very powerful amplifiers, and you're not going to blow them up, you're not going to blow up your hearing and all, as long as you're careful with the volume. This chain I have, now I don't know how it compares to other amazing chains, there's so many out there, but compared to the Elekit with these very expensive 300B tubes I have, the Elrog 300Bs, it's night and day better. That's how much better the tube pre into the solid state is. And Elekit's amazing too, but that's how much better. Like huge soundstage, bass, it's like a subwoofer, layering, like imaging is focused, but more and more micro detail. So now the problem is, and this is a problem.
Using your tube preamp with your headphone amplifier and your headphone.
The tube pre into my pass amp, the 350 watt pass amp, and then that into HD800, HD650. Now,
350 watts into an HD800?
It's 350 into 8 ohms, right? So obviously it'll be less into 300 ohms. But the point is that when you hear this, it's so mind-blowing how good it sounds. Now the problem is that number one, it's noisy. So there is definitely, you don't get a black background like you do with my other stuff. And the other problem is that it generates tons of heat. So in the summer, I can't use it. It's too hot, right? Winter is fine.
This is your lifetime right now. This is the high point of your year.
Yeah. So now here's the problem, Lana, with me, is that I've been bothering the whole Discord and other Discords even with this concept of how do I get an amp for my headphones that sounds like this stack but is quiet and doesn't generate tons of heat. The first thing
I have an answer.
Tell me.
LTA. I have an LTA Z10, and it's a fully tube amp. It's not solid state. However, it's like a 10 watt, actually I think it has 12 watts. But it has a very sort of hybrid solid statey tubey like crossbred sound, and they
Hybrid.
pro yeah, it's not a hybrid, but it kind of sounds like a hybrid, basically. And the good thing about it is that they really pride themselves on, first of all, their tubes last for, I don't know, a very long time, thousands of hours, and they pride themselves on having tubes that do not get hot. So even though there are 10 tubes in there, I would hover my hand above the top plate and it would just feel very mildly warm. Like you couldn't grill a grilled cheese sandwich or anything on it like other amps. Even my Kevin Gilmore amp that I used to have, it would get a lot hotter than this does, and this has 10 tubes in it. So that's one solution.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And actually, one of my friends that has he's a guy that loves DIY. He has NOLA speakers, and he loves LTA and David Burning's designs, and so he actually recommended Z10 as well. So that's something I gotta definitely look into, and hearing it. The other thing I was looking for is also a warmer kind of sound. Like people on the Discord say wet. It sounds wet, and I don't
Right.
still totally know what that means, but I think that's
Slightly
what.
more reverberant.
Okay, fair enough. So that's kind of like the sound I'm going for with the
I
800.
just, what was the definition of wet?
Well, it's two things. Like a room that's not well treated, you have a few more reverberations and then slightly extended decay,
Okay,
is what I would say.
that makes sense. Thanks.
Whereas
Yeah,
dry would be like an anechoic chamber where there's no liveliness or sensation of the room. Dry is all of the room acoustics are absorbed like an anechoic chamber, like those big foam spheres you see them test headphones or sometimes cell phones in.
Well, it's more. That's closer to my room.
yeah, and
Yeah,
and in the headphone amp world, the two ends of the spectrum of really known head amp makers that are talked about frequently on SV is Eddie Current and Donald North, right? On the dry
yeah.
side, generally depends on the era of the Eddie Current amp, but I guess more modern Eddie Current amps are known to be more on the dry side. Still, both of them still exceptional, but more dry. And then Donald is much more wetter sound. And so that's another thing I'm thinking about is like not only getting elevating the headphones to the point where I can get them to this setup I have here where but they're not noisy, they're not super hot, but maybe something a little bit wetter and richer and warmer for the 800. And so I'm thinking about the DNA amps, but the problem obviously is a 1 year wait time and it's also expensive, Stellaris and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
anyways, having said that, what do you guys think about in general speaker amps for headphones, pairing speaker amps with headphones? Have you done it? What are your experiences with it? Do you think there's some value there? Because a lot of times speaker amps are, quiet enough for headphones, and they sometimes are just better designed than headphones.
I'm gonna start
Headphones
because it's gonna
apps,
be
sorry.
very short. I basically the only time I tried it was with a Stax with like an older Stax that came with a transformer, and I've never like directly tried to make a new headphone cable to connect to a planer and stuff that people have tried. So it's kind of a mystery to me. They're basically just more powerful amps, but there may be more to it than that. And a lot of times, like if you have a receiver or a home theater integrated amplifier, they have a transformer um, that basically, or even just a giant resistor that tries to quiet it down so that it doesn't sound too loud. But adding resistance output impedance basically can really change the sound that you get with a headphone. And that's all I know so far. I'd love to learn some more.
Well, having very efficient speakers, I actually learned that, like, for example, even though my amp can power my clipshes just fine, I've heard the same speakers with amps that have exponentially more power, and it gives this thunderous low end. So I think
Yeah.
there's something about having um a reserve, if you will, of power, and there's no reason for that not to transfer over to headphones because, like, I've seen it with speakers, more power gives more slam, more low
Yeah.
end. And with
Mhm.
headphones, I find that, for example, Sennheisers are known as like the kings of scaling.
Yeah.
You throw a lot of power at them, you're gonna get this mind blowing, like, low end, and it's gonna be so thunderous, and it scales in such a way that it might not.
Mhm.
I know it's sort of a trend to deny scaling, not here, but like other places online. I know that it's a huge sort of trend, a mentality that people have to, especially on places like Reddit, to say, "Oh, all you need is a Modi 3 and like a Magni
And you
3."
get everything there is to hear.
Yes, and you can power like 99% of all headphones. And while that is true,
Or
this
you
is
want it to be true.
it's true that, like, it's true in the sense that it'll get it loud enough. However,
Yeah.
I've had a shit Heresy and I've had a shit Magni 3. So, for example, when I stuck my HD 650s on a shit stack, they sounded very dull and very not engaging. Like, the dynamic slam, all of that, it was so muted. It was only reaching 40% of its potential cap. Like if there was a ceiling, which some people say the ceiling is lower with planar magnetics because they sort of reach a cap. I would say with dynamics especially, I've discovered that the more you throw at them, the more they give you in return. So definitely, some of the best I've ever heard my dynamic sound was from extremely powerful amps and speaker amps. And I mean, the same has been said about speakers, like speakers and headphones alike. They like power, even if they don't need it. I've just noticed that things like power, whether they need it or not, they thrive with having that power. It can bring out the very best. So if within reason, like, I highly recommend everyone at least try, if they have something on hand, to like give their headphones as much power and see for yourself if the scaling memes are real. My advice is, like, don't listen to everyone on Reddit who says that, like, all you need is like a shit magni. Like, try for yourself. Like, you might be extremely pleasantly surprised with um how your very cheap basic dynamics actually scale tremendously just with a
Mhm.
little bit more power.
Yeah, can I add
Yeah.
on to
Jeez.
Yeah.
that? I've found, and I'm sure headphones will do the same as speakers. But I've taken and getting back to Atlanta, the clips. You can run those on one pair of AAA batteries, and they'll sound good. But I mean, that's really about all the juice they need. But I've taken I guess they're pretty entry level clip speakers, and some speakers that really required a lot of power. And on the cheap clip speakers, I ran them with, I don't know, 100-watt amp, and they sounded like a clip speaker, a cheap clip speaker. But then
Mhm.
I got the Emotiva amp, the monoblock of Emotiva, and that's the XPR1, which is 1750 watts at 4 ohms. So it can put out some serious power, and it transformed that cheap clip speaker into a completely different grade of speaker. It just, like you said, it created a monster out of it, where you'd never expect that kind of sound to come from the speaker. It made it so much more pleasant to listen to. Not that it needed the volume, but just having that ability to suck whatever it wanted, just endless amounts of power. And then I've taken,
You feel like Palpatine?
I'm sorry?
Unlimited power!
Yeah. I mean, that's an endless supply of power of an amp to feed anything. And it just created it. You wouldn't realize it was the same speaker or the next 2 generations of speaker up. It made the high so much better. The bass was incredible. Mid range was more. It was just closing your eyes, you'd never guess it was that speaker. But I've taken some let's see, Kef, the little I can't think of them, little stand speaker. Not the Meta, but the one before that. I got a pair of
LS50s.
yeah, the LS50s. Thank you.
Mhm.
And those really like power. And I'll tell you what, it transformed them into just a different breed of speaker when you have endless amounts of power. So I'm sure it'll do the same for headphones, but it's amazing what having the reserves can do. I've done the same with tube amps. I had a little 30 watt tube amp, and that was into 2 channels. And watts and tubes are different than solid state watts, and sound real good. The speaker will, but then tripling that as far and just changes the character of the speaker completely. So it's not always the speaker; it's what you're feeding it, And we're not. And a lot of people will state that the amp doesn't add, but maybe 2% of the sound, but it's all in preamp and the speaker. When you're talking that big a difference in adding that many real watts to a speaker, it changes and transposes the sound you hear completely. So I just wanted to add that on to what you were discussing there, Lana.
I may misspeak because I could be wrong. So take this with a grain of salt, not an audio engineer. At least I have plenty more to learn. But a lot of times the impedance on a headphone, it might be stated as a certain number of ohms at 1 kilohertz. But if you go to a higher or lower hertz range, sometimes the impedance is a lot higher or lower. And with a higher impedance, sometimes it might be underfed. That is one potential explanation, scientific, for a difference of a more powerful amp. However, I could be wrong. I feel like Zach might actually be able to speak on that a little bit better than I, if he hasn't had to do other things.
But I'm still kind of catching up on the conversation. I'm not sure on the topic we're talking, but I can sort of catch in the gist of it.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to ask. Just generally, though, we're curious if is it a bad idea, a good idea, at all beneficial to connect headphones to speaker amps and their massive power supply?
Yeah, I think it's a viable option. There's a lot of people running really sensitive headphones now with really clean amplifiers, even speaker amplifiers that are tube amps, like mine, where it's a speaker or a headphone amp. The headphone out is a bit different on my amp, but you can run it from the speaker taps as well if you wanted to. So I don't know. I think it's a unique situation where you can do that, and some planar headphones seem to scale better with that sort of system. But yeah,
Right.
it's definitely
Which throws
a,
Sorry, I was just going to say the planars completely throw my theory out the window because they often have a completely linear impedance and they don't really function in the same way. So that's a good counterexample to what my theory was.
Yeah, well, Abyss recommends that you look at speaker amps as an alternative, and I know people who run their Abyss on monoblock, like freaking 200 watt per channel monoblock, speaker amps, and they have to run a preamp obviously into that and have it down to like negative 80 dB, and then you got to start wondering like are you listening to more the preamp than you are the monoblocks type thing. But yeah, I mean it's definitely an option. I wouldn't start there. I'd say there's definitely other options, and there's like $200-300 US amplifiers that will drive any headphone on the market right now. So it's a unique situation where you'd want to use a speaker amp to run a headphone. But yeah, definitely something you can do.
Well, where do you think the for example with bass and especially sub bass and roll off there, where would you theorize that upgrading an amplifier, where does the better impact and tightness and sensation of sub bass come from that some people attribute to using uber powerful speaker amps? Is that attributable to something else?
I think it's more to do with the driver technology than anything else. And having headroom for sub bass is important. You want to have a little bit of headroom with the power of the amplifier, but having 190 watts above what you need is not really going to completely make the sub bass go to speaker levels or anything. So I'd say the Abyss and Sassafras are probably the two best headphones for sub bass, and you can probably run them on an amplifier to almost 99% of their potential. That's 2 watts into their rated impedance. Like you don't need to have insane wattage going into them. But I mean, the speaker amps are gonna have some level of sins of commission sometimes that some people enjoy. They might be a bit bass heavier. I mean, there's certain other source things you can use that will enhance the bass on tracks beyond neutral, but to actually get the sub bass from the transducer to its maximum potential, I'd say you don't need to have obscene amounts of headroom. I think I'm not a huge advocate of going down that path for bass or for anything like that. But
so maybe it's not a question of amplitude and just how much sound pressure it creates, but maybe the other timbral characteristics like how clean and how low the signal to noise ratio is, and other stuff, crosstalk and whatnot. Other aspects that can be possibly part of it.
Headphone amps are optimized for the impedance, of headphones, whereas speaker amps, some speaker amps will literally blow up if you connect a headphone to the speaker taps because it just
almost like a short.
Basically, because it's not expecting you to be putting something like that as the load, and you've got to be very careful. Like I've seen people blow up, transducers as well because they forgot to turn the preamp up to like negative 99, and then
doesn't Dankpods do that in a lot of his videos? Dankpods.
I have seen people destroy drivers on purpose to like watch them flex and then record them in slow motion. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge advocate of it. I've had speaker amps before and run my headphones on them. I preferred far cheaper solid state amps than much more expensive solid state speaker amps with dynamic drivers. I find that if it's a really sensitive driver, that often the speaker amps are a lot noisier, than the really small ones. But then again, I haven't had some of the benchmark, obscene rated 0.01 THD
all the
Zs. Sort of solid state speaker amps to play with. So, that I did hear the RALs, right? And I heard my HD800s,
ribbon driver.
The ribbon driver, and they were run on like a 500 watt pass amp with a pass preamp, and like I was astounded with how clean that was. Like there was absolutely no noise, no anything from this like mega amp, and then we were running dynamic drivers. So, but I mean, I still think it would have sounded better from like a well optimized headphone amp that probably cost a fraction of the price. But that's just my opinion.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that head amp that you're talking about, Zach, that will sound as good as my tube pre into my speaker amp. And I'm sure it definitely could be out there. It's just a matter of finding it. And it's also tricky because part of it is and this goes back to that discussion that Passion for Sound Lachlan had about the Susvara and powering it, and how he doesn't believe that Susvara needs very much power to sound good. He thinks that the people who claim that are really just commenting on how a amp is these bigger amps, more powerful amps, are just better designed than the less powerful amps, and that's why they sound better. And I guess that is kind of a little bit tricky, distinguishing.
Right.
You know, a more powerful amp that maybe also has more current. That might be a factor. Is it more just the design of the amp, and that's why it sounds better? In scenarios where it does,
amp instead of a $400 amp.
yeah, is it just the design, or is it the power, or is it the current? Like that's going to take some serious testing to kind of answer
Power
that kind
made
of
up
question.
of current and voltage.
Yeah.
And you can actually have like a voltage mode amp, which pretty much almost all amplifiers are, or at least in their final stages, are switched to. But there's also like a current mode amp, where with a voltage drive amp, the gain is done in the voltage stage, and it's kind of designed for headphones to have, or they're designed to have like as minimal, ideally as minimal outdoor output impedance as possible. Within a couple ohms. Sometimes a little bit doesn't make a huge detriment, but theoretically and ideally, zero. Whereas a current amp would want to have the opposite, basically an infinite output impedance, to sound its best and operate its best. And again, not an acoustic or even an electrical engineer, but all this is on Wikipedia. Definitely recommend people, if they're curious, to look more into it. But it could be power, but it's also, like I was kind of hinting with Zach, and correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, but there's also like so many more things that go into the design of an amplifier than simply current or voltage output.
Yeah.
The quality, the capacitors or the filmic resistors, and the crosstalk design, isolation.
I think a lot of that goes into tuning when they're trying to design something for a headphone amp as well. So yeah, I think there's differences there in design goals between speaker amps and headphone amps.
Mm-hmm. And a certain amount of, for example, you were really Smod. You were really into the idea of a wetter sound, and you were kind of trying to find out exactly what that was, but you felt like you liked it. And a home speaker system, a hi-fi system, naturally, generally has a very wet sound. Most people don't have tons and tons of acoustic deadening all over their house to completely make a soundproof kind of environment. There's a lot of wall reflections, and we're used to hearing the sound that way. And technically, that is a distortion over the original recorded signal, or at least it's added to what was in the original recording. But it's how we're used to hearing things, and it's also kind of like when we're not trying to listen to a clinical dry sound, we like it. So sometimes this thing like crosstalk, it's technically a distortion or coloration, but it could be really pleasant. And sometimes it also might be a nice addition that just seems more musical, regardless of power. So I don't know. There's just many different ways to approach the problem of enjoyable entertainment audio.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic to kind of it's not easy
Which
to
means
get
we
to.
don't get bored. We don't have just one answer. We get to keep talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that we have to kind of keep exploring. But yeah, I definitely think there's some value in exploring this and exploring speaker amps, even though a lot of people are kind of against them for headphones, depending on the headphone as well. Sometimes I find that there's a lot of arguments about also value, where some of these headphone amps are very, very pricey and expensive. Not all of them, obviously, but many of them are. And if you have a harder to drive planer, for example, you might be better served with an older kind of speaker amp versus like a very fancy like Bakun or whatever it is, that's cost,
Right.
how
There's a
much does a
lot more
Bakun cost?
vintage speaker amps than there are vintage headphone amps. If you
Exactly,
consider
exactly.
the history of like, headroom was, and the very few, the history of headphone specific designed amps. I don't know. Is it longer than 20 years? 30 years? I don't feel like it's been, there's not nearly as much like hi-fi passionate getting the last ounce of it history length as there has been with speaker amps. So yeah, if you're looking for a really good quality vintage piece, there's going to be more vintage options in the speaker world.
Yeah, just imagine, an old and there's a whole thread on this on HeadFi about pairing speaker amps with headphones, and there's a lot of kind of experiences that are there. But yeah, just imagine like a powerful older Bryston or one of these kind of newer Coda amps. For a Sasvara, I mean, the price would be the same as getting a Bakun, pretty much the same 5-6K. So which I have not done this comparison. I've heard this as far off of my speaker amp, but I've not compared it to something like a Bakun. But could that would that speaker amp kind of outperform the Bakun potentially? And if it does, then what's nice is that you could potentially use that one piece of equipment for both headphones and speakers and kind of save money as long as you're willing to kind of swap each time you're kind of changing.
And have only one location.
yeah. So I find that kind of just fascinating. And if you get a chance, Evie, if you get a chance, put the 800 on a speaker amp because it really changes it. The amount of slam that you get on a speaker amp, at least speaker amps that I've heard, it just completely transforms it. And what's interesting is maybe it is a question of design, not power, because my HE9 has a lot of power, right? I think it's something like it's over 50 watts into 8 ohms, I believe. Into 300 ohms, I think it's 9 watts, something like that. And so it's a ton of power for the 800. But when I compare it to the Pass in terms of the bass, and I put the 800 on the Pass, the bass, it's the slam, the impact extension is just clearly better. It's not even close. So is that the audio GD is not that good? Is the Pass better? Is it the design? I think the design obviously is a factor, but is there something to be said for this overhead? I'm sorry, having more overhead in terms of power, current, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, but try it out if you've never tried it. Put 800 on a speaker amp, and I think you'll be surprised.
I mean, the first time I heard the HD 820 was on a completely overbuilt, ridiculous, you can't even buy it retail, Engineer's Test Bench amp.
Oh yeah.
Like it was, I don't even know how many, probably over $100,000 of components in it. Just like,
wow.
I was at Sennheiser's headquarters, and they were like, yeah, this is what we use when we were designing our stuff. So like, we completely want to remove any chance of the amplifier not being enough. So, there is some definite interesting reaches. I guess what I would ask if I was going to diagnose where the sound quality comes from, I would click into my old IT brain and start being like, okay, well, let's isolate some things. Can you describe for me better, this bass quality you're talking about? Slam, to try to maybe lead a question a little bit, I would ask, does it seem to rumble more? Does it seem to have more, does it seem to have a larger presence? Or is it tighter, more, more expressed in a, tight, impactful, very short-lived, because again, like some of our bass perception is how we feel it in our body and how we feel it on our ears and our physical kind of touch sense of it. And that's how we understand the world. And that's blended in with the literal sound pressure hitting our eardrums. So some of that scrambles some of our other senses in a certain way where we have a psychoacoustic impression of bass that is both volume, but it's also how it mixes in with all of our different senses. And sometimes, one of the things I was talking with Yarmo, he was talking about his design with the IE900, is like, you can go for super clean, but when you don't have any outer ear interaction or other things, you have to tune the headphone differently. And whatever he did, I've actually had certain tracks where it's like, wow, I feel like I know I'm not feeling anything in my stomach, but that bass drop just made me feel like in the pit of my stomach, like, oh, it's like the same psychoacoustic cues that made me feel like I just felt a subwoofer or something wild and crazy. I'm not saying you're wrong though. I'm just saying that's another possible explanation, is that perhaps
I would say that
the other amp is more musical.
I would say that the bass is a factor, but also there's improvements in other properties too. That's what I found, is that
Sure.
at least in my setup, improvements in terms of soundstage and imaging and layering, micro detail and stuff like that. But the problem with my setup is that it's not very scientific at all, because I'm comparing like one
A
amp
lot of
to
changes at once.
to completely different equipment, and I'm not just changing one small variable at a time. So I don't know. The honest answer is I really don't know. But
Yeah.
all I'm saying is that I think it's worth consideration, and I think it's worth exploration in terms of, okay, well, I'm thinking about getting a potentially very expensive headphone amp. I'm potentially thinking of getting a whatever it may be, like a Bakun, or whether what's the other one, the US4, or what's it called, from Lakehead, the Lakehead guys. Forgot the name of it.
I've heard Lakehead, but not the US4.
It's like their flagship, and it's this fairly small device, but it's like 5-6 grand, or it's a lot of money. And then compare it to a speaker amp, and I think you might be surprised. Compare it to maybe a solid state integrated Luxman or something like that, and all I'm saying is just have a listen, and let's let's even put the theory aside for a second. Just go out and have listens, and then let's kind of report back and see what we find. And I think it will be very interesting what the results are.
I definitely encourage. Go ahead, Ilana.
I was just gonna say, are we still talking about using headphones with speaker amps?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the thing that I will say there, like scaling memes aside and headphones sounding better with more power aside, it's like I think a lot of people will eventually find themselves in a place where they will appreciate the fact that they have an amp that can do speakers and headphones, because I think it would be very rare for someone to upgrade down from speakers to headphones, but it's very common for people to upgrade from headphones to speakers. And when that happens, like if you're stuck with a bunch of amps that are headphone amps, you're going to be in a predicament. You're going to say, "Oh shoot, I have a ton of headphone amps, and now that I want speakers or plan on getting speakers, I'm stuck with a bunch of headphone amps, that are not powerful enough to run my speakers, or are not designed to run my speakers." But if you find yourself in a situation like I did, I got a speaker amp that had a headphone integrated into it, and when I got speakers, I was like, "Oh, cool. Well, now I can run this with my speakers." And it wasn't like, "Oh, I dropped a ton of money on it and now I can't use it in a use case scenario." So I think that aside from just figuring out, like putting all that aside about headphones sounding better on speaker amps, a lot of people might also just find it better in the long run if they have a speaker amp that they can use headphones and speakers with, and then you're not limiting yourself to like a very sort of niche product that might not always be useful for you.
Yeah, something designed for both. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an upgrade path, and there's definite just inherent value in. Oh, I can use it for more things. It's more versatile, and I don't outgrow it. Yep. Although inevitably, I mean, I don't know. I personally bought a uh, integrated amplifier, you know, AVR, well before I bought a speaker amp. I was actually on a vacation back. I was coming back from visiting my grandparents in Missouri, totally different state, and just happened to drive by a store that was having a closing liquidation, and I picked up a Yamaha receiver for what I thought was a great price, but it was just an okay price, and used that with speakers, used it with my headphones, used it for years before I was not even out of college yet. But it was as much as I could afford at the time. But now I think that, you know, I'm not so bothered by the fact that batteries leaked in the remote and I can't basically use it. It's kind of time for me to upgrade. So I don't know. No plan is foolproof, future proof, but definitely like if you're gonna, it's still worth having the ability to do speakers if you think you're going to be doing that soon anyway, or like, you know, if you're renting an apartment, or let's say you're in college, uh, there's just only going to be a few years that you're there. So if your situation is 10 years out, you're not going to have speakers, worry about it in 10 years. But if you're like in college, or you're maybe even a graduate who might um, just be starting their graduate degree, or if you're living in an apartment, you may find yourself in a situation where, oh, I finished my school, or um, I'm working while I'm at school, and now I can have my own place. Yeah, you might end up having your own speakers. And it's definitely nice to have both. And there's some great integrated amplifiers. Integrated meaning they have both the headphone out and the speaker out. Or people have gotten very clever with speaker taps, adapting them to headphones. So I don't know. Like Zach said, you know, carefully you don't um, blow up
Blow your
anything.
stuff, yeah.
There's definitely a right way to go about it. So that's where the recommendation for just trying it might be a little bit hesitant to do universally. But if someone says, this has kind of worked, it's been safe, I like it, eh, that could be worth looking more into, I guess. But I don't know. There's, I think that we're going to continue to see better and better headphone amps as well. And secret sauce is everywhere. And more secret sauce will be discovered.
All right. Let's finish this off now with Lana's land, where Lana kind of goes into her kind of findings related to her system, her thoughts, and let's kind of springboard off that in terms of the final discussion here.
Well, lately I haven't really cycled through a lot of gear. So I'm a bit out of the loop there. I've been enjoying I sold my Abyss. Part of me I know
Oh wow.
part of me was really part of me was expecting me to be more heartbroken than I actually am, but
Is it the
truth
second time you've owned one?
no, it's not. I had a loaner
Oh,
unit.
all right.
Yeah. I guess what I learned from owning the Abyss is that I really wanted it and I really saved up for it and I thought that it would like solve all my audio desires and problems, and then I still found myself listening to my Sennheiser HD650 and HD800S 80% of the time, and then my speakers when I wasn't listening to headphones, I was listening to speakers for the majority, because it kind of worked backwards for me. I got the Abyss thinking that I wouldn't be able to have speakers for a while, and then someone, my spouse, let me convert the spare room into a speaker room. So I was like, okay, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't have even maybe bought the Abyss. I would have just focused on the speaker setup. So once I did that, I mean, it was smooth sailing. I've been enjoying my speakers, and I've been enjoying my Sennheisers. I also have a Aurorus Borealis that I adore, and
Mhm.
as good as the Abyss sounds, I was like, "Man, it's like 4,000 grand used price sitting on my shelf that I anticipated to be using more, but because I now have speakers and I'm still so
Mm.
enamored with my, my Sennheisers, I love Sennheisers. I swear I should have been hired by Sennheiser because I would
Well, I officially ended my work with Sennheiser 2 days ago. I got my letter saying thank you for your work. You're done.
uh
But I still like Sennheiser too, so I'm with you. I understand.
and yeah, Sennheisers are timeless, and that's why they get shilled everywhere because everyone loves. It's rare. You do run into the occasional Sennheiser hater, but like lately, I've been running more into like
They're not very hipster, I guess.
yeah, but lately I've been running more into actually like planar magnetic and Abyss haters. So I think it's more rare to find a Sennheiser hater. But yeah, I've been loving my clip speakers, and eventually I'm gonna get bigger clip speakers or possibly Focal Aria floor standers because I heard those and I really love them. For the budget price, budget being they cost 4,000, but to me that's like a budget price for speakers. And yeah, so I just noticed that I wasn't using Abyss that much. I had speakers and I had other headphones, and so yeah, I made the painful decision to sell them right as Abyss increased the price of entry to owning an Abyss by $1,000. So now it's like if I ever decide to go back to it, I'm gonna have to pay 1,000 extra. But
are well aware of Kamala Harris.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just muted Nick. I think there was some noise on his side.
Like he got an unexpected call.
I was wondering what that was. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks.
I sold my Abyss and I thought that I would be devastated, but I'm actually not. I'm okay. I'm enjoying my speakers. I'm enjoying my 650s, my 800s, my Bori. I would love a ZMF Verite in the future
It's
because
like one of those rare, like knots and burls, special woods.
oh gosh, the woods are gorgeous, but they sell out so fast, and
They
it's like
do.
you need to have the money on hand right as you're about to purchase it, or else someone will
Yeah, as soon
just
as they're available.
yeah, or else someone will just swoop in and buy one. But yeah, I absolutely love the ZMF Verite. As far as future plans, I I don't know. I want a head amp that's tube because I like my tube amp. It's not as tubey as other tube amps, so I definitely want that as a complement. And for my speaker rig, I don't know, I really love Prima Luna. I heard the Prima Luna Evo 400 with clip shiz, and it was to die for. It takes EL34 tubes, very different from the tubes in my amp, so naturally just sounds very different. I am struggling a bit with when you go to a dealer and you hear speakers with a certain setup and then you take it home and it's not all you thought it would be on your system. I'm kind of struggling with that a little bit. Um So I would say that is the only downside. Like my speakers don't sound bad by any means, but like I heard them with a tube amp that I really, really liked more with them than this one. So I'm just trying to figure out when I can implement something like it into my chain. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with what I have.
Yeah, that's
I
that's a real
knew,
end of
I
an
knew. I
that's
actually knew.
that's a real end of an era with the TC because TC is the best headphone I've ever heard, but no, I totally kind of see where you're coming from in terms of pairing the Sennheisers with tubes and that kind of thing, and obviously getting the speakers. That makes sense. What you did makes sense to me.
I will say this, Zach told me, I don't know if he's there right now, but he told me once when I was planning to get TC that he had it once and that eventually I would see through the not the flaws, but more of the gimmick, the the sort of the honeymoon. He told me like the honeymoon phase would be over eventually and I would live with it for a while and see that like speakers are the way. I mean, obviously speakers are the way, but you know. And I remember when Zach told me that, I was like, poof, I'm always gonna be madly in love with my Abyss. Like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Um, but and it's true, when I had the Abyss Loaners, I was over the moon enamored with it, like 100%. And I feel like a lot of people that get Abyss Loaners, that's why they buy them, because they have them for a while and they're like, I have to have this. I was one of those people. And then I got it and I used it a lot. And yeah, I'm not saying I wasn't always wowed by them, but definitely preferred speakers. And Abyss sits in this sort of crevice between headphones and speakers. They really try to give you the best of both worlds, just like the RAL SR1A does. And I feel like that sort of presentation is so different. It's sort of above headphones and below speakers. And
Wow.
that sort of thing is so enamoring and it draws you in and you really like it. But then eventually I and probably other people were like, you know what? I would rather just listen to speakers and like my favorite headphones, like the HD800s, the 650s, and Abyss sort of sits in this in between zone. Um, and eventually I just I said I remember saying in my head Zach was right. I didn't tell him that, but I remember thinking Zach was right. Like he told me eventually I would outgrow this. Like I always liked them. Every time I sell something, people start like coming at me like, "Oh, you said you liked this so much and now you're selling it." And honestly, you can still like something and sell it and just decide that you prefer to spend your time like with my speakers. I prefer to spend my time now with my speakers. So when you have something, it's different if you upgrade to speakers, for example, and you have a $500 headphone or $1,000 headphone that you really like. But when you upgrade to speakers and then you have like a $5,000 headphone that you really like, but it's nagging at you that you're not using it as much as you used to or as much as you thought you would. It's not it doesn't eat away at you quite as much as, oh, there's a $500 headphone sitting on my shelf that I'm not using as much. Here, it's like, oh, there's a $5,000 headphone sitting on my shelf that I'm not using as much. I could really take that money and like pay off my bills or, put it elsewhere. So eventually it just started nagging away at me that I was spending most of my time with my speakers, and there was this $5,000 paperweight that, I liked it and I used it still, but not enough to justify keeping it. And I really just, I'll be honest, I wanted the money. So
You wanted to spend $5,000 on tubes.
no, I wanted the money. I wanted the money, so I sold it. And now that I utilized the money in the ways that I intended, now I can save up for tubes and whatever else that I'm gonna end up eventually saving up for.
Yeah, I've been looking at keyboards lately.
Speaker. This is the way.
Another expensive hobby.
It is. You were saying, Nick? Oh, you came back.
No, yeah, I was just saying that
He's
speakers.
gone again.
This is the way.
No,
I mean,
I feel for Lana because I too was enamored by Abyss at first. pretty early on in my journey and fell in love with it and decided that it was worth me spending like $5,000 on to get it. And then, as I sort of lived with it for like a year or so, I started to realize there was a few things I didn't like that it did, but at the same time, its presentation is unique amongst headphones still to this day. There's nothing that really quite does what it does, probably due to the ergonomics that allows it to generate SPL in ways that other headphones simply can't unless they use a similar ergonomic sort of system. But yeah, eventually I got tired of it, and I figured I'd watch Lana's sort of trajectory. It was basically parallel to mine, so I was just like, made the call early on. I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is gonna be it for you, because you were saying, oh, I'm done. I'm like, no, you're never really done in this hobby. You just kind of just
Yeah.
sort of you kind of just shift from different thing to different thing, and even when you're happy, you're always just like, but what if?
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if Smod ever got one. I wonder if he would end up where you and I are, Zach, and because he's saying, "Oh, Abyss is like it for headphones, like the best he's heard." But like you, Zach, I lived with it, and I ended up just using my Sennheisers more, and that's just the way it is for some reason.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely possible that I would move away from TC2 if I had it, because as you go down the tube rabbit hole, I think then you get to hear pairings with your Sennheiser dynamics that perhaps you enjoy more than the TC with whatever amp it does well with. Sorry, Zach, what were you saying?
Oh no, I was just saying, agreeing with Lana that yeah, the Sennheisers, you always seem to go back to them is the problem. Like it's a 30-year-old bloody HD 6 whatever 50 or XX or whatever, and I just keep going back and being like, wow, I'm just pretty happy with this. Like despite having had systems that headphones
Right.
that cost fucking thousands and thousands of dollars. There's just
Right.
something about their presentation and design
You
that
want
just
that
seems to
feeling of progress, but it keeps drawing you back in because it's like, I'm
yeah.
really happy with this.
I get frustrated when everyone wants to have this conversation about how much the hobby has advanced in the last 20 years, and I just don't feel like it really has that much. Maybe in some sort of
Computer
processing
space.
ways and that, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think we've talked about it before. I don't think that the actual transducers have significantly changed. Yes, there's more options, but
Our way
are
to measure
they
them is better.
way to measure them is better, but still not perfect and still only giving us like
No,
a two-dimensional image of a three-dimensional thing that's happening. Our understanding
for
is still
sure.
sort of evolving in that regard as well. And because we're so subjectively different, it's minimal value in them anyway, in my opinion. Like there's some value obviously, but like it's
Yeah,
not like I can't just look at a graph and be like, oh, I'll like that, or
yeah,
I won't like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's like, oh, I feel like I heard it with my eyeballs.
Well, some people do that. Like I've seen people
Oh,
have opinions on headphones based purely off of the FR and been like, "Oh yeah, this is my opinion on this." I'm like, "Have you owned this device? Have you tried it on your head?" No. Oh,
right.
that's interesting. Like,
Oh,
yeah.
but
I bought Abyss before I heard 650 on tubes and before I owned the Bracasti, and I remember, and I bet several audiophiles have this existential crisis where I bought a Felix tube amp, and it wasn't even like the Elise or the Euphoria. It was an entry level, and I had Bracasti. I had just gotten the Bracasti M3 DAC, and I remember I hooked up the Bracasti to the Felix tube amp. Sorry, the Felix tube amp, and listened to the Sennheiser 650 on it, and I had this moment where I thought this sounds better than Abyss on my, the tube amp that I bought specifically for it, the LTA, and I had this crisis where I was like, man, like here's this $500 headphone that I'm enjoying more, and I already spent all this money on Abyss, and I was like, you know, like I feel like a dumbass now because like, I'm just liking it more, but I invested so much time, I built the system around Abyss, I was like, "Oh god," like, reselling this, I'm gonna take a hit, and I
and then
did.
you went back to a $200 headphone, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, so it just devastated me that I would end up liking one combination more, and I did lose like selling Abyss. I bought it at retail and I definitely lost 1,000 on it. And I think that's just a lesson a lot of us learn, We've all been there, at least I think a lot of us have been there.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's going to be harder with the resale tax changes in America, but we'll see.
All right.
Um,
Well,
Go ahead.
that was an awesome show, guys. I really appreciate it. It feels really good to be back at it after being away for so long. So thanks a lot,
Yeah, for
guys.
less time.
Thank you very much. Any final words before we close it out?
No, just
Have
thanks for
fun.
having
Sorry
us.
about your wallet. Sorry, Zach?
Oh, I was just saying thanks for having us, Smod. No, it was a good show. I don't have anything else to add. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Smod.
Great to be back.
No, thank you, guys, and hopefully we can do it again soon. Take care.
All right, take care.
Cheers.
Okay, bye.
Thanks,